Good evening. Thank you all for being here this evening. Welcome to Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership's 6th Annual State of the District Community Forum. I'm Amy Voller, President of the Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership. We'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. This evening's agenda is outlined in an insert in the brochure that you were handed at the door. On the back of that agenda is a list of opportunities to get involved with CEP in support of our public schools. Before you leave this evening, please take a moment to complete that form and turn it into a CEP board member. Every form we receive will be entered into a raffle. 2 lucky winners will each win a pair of tickets to CEP's 2018 Disco Inferno Dance Explosion. Yeah. We have with us this evening Interim Superintendent Dr. Stan Olson and Director of Curriculum and Assessments Dr. Mike Nelson to speak to where our district has been in the recent past and where it is now. Due to a family medical emergency, incoming Superintendent Dr. Stephen Cook is not able to be here in person. However, we are grateful for his willingness to participate in the discussion of where our district is headed via teleconference later this evening. The 3 portions to our evening, past, present, and future, will include a brief 7-minute question and answer period between each segment. On your chair is a card. You can feel free to to write down questions as they come to you through the evening. And if you raise your hand, a CEP member will collect those and bring those to us so we can be prepared with some questions at the end of each discussion. We'd like to begin by thanking School District 271 for partnering with us in tonight's event. We'd like to thank Innovation Collective for providing this incredible venue. And we'd like to thank Bakery by the Lake for providing drinks. We'd also like to welcome in the audience tonight our current school board members. Present this evening are trustees Lisa May, Tom Hearn, and Dave Eubanks. We do at this time send out our thoughts and condolences to the Pickford family as they navigate their family loss. Following this evening's program, we invite you to enjoy refreshments and visit with CEP board members and district representatives. The Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership is an independent, nonprofit partnership motivated by the belief that every student in our district deserves an education of the highest quality. Tonight's event is an opportunity to promote CEP's mission to unite and inform our community regarding current education issues and promote excellence in public education.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Hanks, Secretary of Education, Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership. Our first speaker this evening from the Coeur d'Alene School District will be Interim Superintendent Dr. Stan Olson. The community and school staff have been participating in data summits, closely examining a wide range of data for all grade levels regarding academic achievement and other indicators of student success. Dr. Olson will share insights and direction gained from these forums. If you are prompted by questions during this presentation, please write your questions on the question form you received on your chair and raise your hand so a CEP board member can come and collect them. We encourage you to submit questions through the program rather than waiting until the end, just to help us maintain the flow of our evening. Each question and answer period is just 7 minutes, so we'll try to get as many questions in as we can. So welcome our first presenter, Superintendent Dr. Olson.
Well, thank you. I'm going to test my technological skills here and see if Mike was lying to me. That's not my fault. Well, we're only, there we are. Okay. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be with you, not only tonight, but since July of this year. As all of you know, I am an interim superintendent coming into this community on the premise that we were going to work together, we being the collective we, the Board of Trustees, our staff, our students, and our community, to identify issues, questions, concerns, key informational pieces to set the table for the ongoing superintendency. And obviously, many of you in this room were participants in the superintendent selection process. I think we have a tremendous selection who will be with you very, very soon, who is excited as all get out, and wanted me to remind you about a couple of things, one of which was he's so excited that he's not buying a home here. He's buying property and building a home here. So his expectation is that this is going to be not only his emotive home, where his heart is, but also his cognitive home, where his head and his work is along the way. And obviously, Steve can speak to that earlier. I have had a lot of experience in the field, and I've shared this concept in a number of places this year. 43 years in the field, attachment to 3-4 superintendencies in 3 different states. And it was always interesting when I would go to a different state, the types of welcomes that I would get. I served in Natrona County, Wyoming. This is the Casper area of Wyoming, and I'm sure many of you have stayed months there and enjoyed the wind in Natrona County. But I can remember my first week in Natrona County, the welcome I received was a quiet one. It was a tall gentleman, a 20-gallon Stetson hat. Not a word was spoken, Western garb, came in the office, dropped this on my desk, and walked out. And turned around and said, "Welcome to Casper," and then moved on. And I picked this up later on, and I thought, holy mackerel. And I know you can't read this, but it says, "Welcome to Wyoming. Frankly, we don't give a damn how you did things back home." And it was, it was kind of a statement that, I interpreted it anyway, it was kind of a statement that we're going to work together to move this district forward. When I went to Boise, it was very, very interesting. The first week I was in Boise, I got a letter from a very kind lady who said some very, very interesting things to me. And this is not the letter. There it is. And it was basically, and I'll paraphrase, welcome to the community. I cannot help but mention one thing I've noticed in your recent interview on television. It's a pet peeve of mine. People who have been raised in Boise know how to pronounce it. Many people who are imported from other parts of the country give themselves away by an incorrect pronunciation of the word. It is supposed to be pronounced like Boise, not Boise. So get with it, young man. So that was from, and honestly, my first week here, I had nothing but very, very kind and wonderful welcome. And probably the kindest of all was my invitation to join the Hayden Senior Citizens Club, which I have done, by the way, along the way. We want to talk about a bunch of things, but I want to start out by saying the state of the district is solid and strong. I came here as a person with no agenda, with a different set of eyes and a different set of ears to help. And I hope I have done that as well as it has been possible, and I've learned strong English skills here, and that we'll be able to continue that and hand off what I think is a very good school district on its way to becoming a great school district because of the work that has been done before, the work that's going on now, and the work that is yet to come. One of the things that's been very interesting is it's kind of an alignment of planets this year. Relatively new board of trustees, one board member brand new to the board, but different levels of service. We have Dave and Tom, 5 years on the board? 5 years, and then a 2-year stint, and then, or two 2-year stints, and then a 1-year stint. So relatively new board, very interested in moving the district forward, passionate about transparency, very passionate about saying, this is who we are, folks, and this is us, not only with all of our wonderful, wonderful programs, staff people, children, but also our warts, the things that aren't working as well for us along the way. And very early in the process, when we had discussions with what I consider to be one of the top cabinet groups in this state, and maybe in this region of the country, a very, very, very talented, switched on, energetic cabinet that is also focused on success for every student. We sat down and started talking about how we move forward with taking a look at issues that confront us. We decided that one of the things we would start with, let's see if this is going to work. Do I punch this once, twice, 3 times? There it is, huh? Pretty good. Okay. We started with the concept of Data Summit. Let me tell you how this materialized. We were planning for a Board of Trustees meeting, and I don't know if you've ever seen one of the agendas for the district, but they're pretty full. And we were going to allow probably about 10 minutes discussion on one of the major performance assessments that the district uses, and said, golly, I don't think we're going to cover it in that. Why don't we talk about it a little bit more? And why don't we do some kind of a data summit where on a day we could spend 7 or 8 hours talking about all of this? Sure, 7 or 8 hours talking about all of this. We'll bring out our performance measures for elementary, our performance measures for secondary, get a chance to present, and then interact with, again, our board, staff, and community representation. Well, Data Summit number 1, September 20th, 1917, hit Midtown, began the process, and about 8 hours later, we were through almost all of the elementary coverage. And we kind of looked around and thought, holy mackerel, how could this be? We didn't get through this, but we talked about a lot of important things and identified a lot of key issues along the way. So we agreed as a collective body to do Data Summit 2.0, continued the process of investigation to closure. Well, that was another 7 hours, again, of presenting and talking and presenting and talking. And when it was over, we scheduled Data Summit 3.0, which concluded this past Friday. Significant work, great deal of buy-in by virtually everybody in the room on a consistent basis. It worked out particularly well. I've never been in a district that spent 8 hours on a data summit, much less 16, 23, 22 or 23 hours. And I've never been in a district that said, let's open it up to everybody and let's talk about all of it. And let's use this, again, to set the table for our next steps and stages. So that's what we did. Well, I'm back here. What we asked was to, and by the way, this is all on our website, and we'll be happy to mail you packets of this. We asked for the most part to identify key areas, and then under each of these areas is a kind of a deep dossier of information about issues. Mike, you know if that's, or is that the first page or the second page? Is that page 1? Okay. You can kind of see the key issues. The first one up there, secondary math, for those of you that have been in the district for a while, been watching, we're not very happy with our secondary math scores. They have been fluctuating, but also heading in a downward direction. And there are lots of questions as to why that's happening. I would attest to you, having lived almost 70 years on the planet and drinking the water both here and in Boise, that it's not the water. I will attest to you that our children are not any less intelligent than any kids in Boise or any kids anywhere else in this country. And our staff people is every bit as talented as the staff anywhere. 2 minutes to go. Okay, in any event, what we learned was we've got to take a look at math as well as a whole bunch of other things along the way. Staffing, equity of services, growth and demographics, and we'll talk about that a little bit more if somebody asks me a question about that as time goes on, because it's one that's extremely important. One of the things that I want to emphasize in the remaining time that I have is we closed last Friday after these 3 data summits with a path forward. And the path forward basically is this. We're going to take the information from the data summits and move to a next level, and that is a thing called curriculum audit. Some of you may know the Fenwick English model of curriculum audit. It's pretty much authored and promoted by Phi Delta Kappa, and it's basically a team of experts that come in from around the country and say, you've done some preliminary work, let us take the items that you have created, let us take a look at your test results, your performance history, and on and on and on, and let us talk with your board, your staff, your community, your students. And we're going to come back and basically give you a report. And the curriculum audit model that English does is a deficit model. Some of you know gap analysis. This is the deficit model that doesn't say, you really got nice paint on the walls at the high schools. It basically says, here are the things that may be holding you back from helping kids succeed much more substantially, kids at all levels and in all settings. They bring back your deficits, and you get a chance to talk about those. And certainly, given some time, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. From that particular point, we come together and create a strategic plan. And what that basically means is that, again, as a community, staff, students, the board, the community, we take a look at the results of the audit, we take a look at the results of Data Summit, and wonderfully, with the new superintendent, because he is a member of this august body and this wonderful community, we basically create a plan on which we come to consensus to move ahead the district. And the reason for a strategic plan and the reason for the importance of the strategic plan, there are a number of reasons. One of which is time to refocus, time to retool, time to really prioritize the types of things we want to do as a school district. Got to do that for a number of reasons. The time we have and the resources. What I found when I came to this community and to the school district is we live pretty close to the margin budget-wise. And I've said this once, I'll say this time and time and time again. We run out of money long before we run out of needs and great ideas, okay? So what has to happen is we've got to decide what comes first, what comes second, what comes third, and so on and so forth in a process of strategic plan. I want to emphasize one other thing. 80% of strategic plans that I've ever seen end up on the shelf with a lot of dust on them, okay? So what has to happen here is that this process, where everybody has bought into it on the front end of it with Data Summit and promised future participation, is known and operationalized. In other words, we fix that set of priorities, we budget according to those priorities, and we follow the plan. And we follow it together. Strategic plans usually last 3 to 5 years before they start getting a little wacky and need to be updated along the way. But this is a tremendous opportunity for our district to come together in, I wouldn't say a singular focus, but in determined foci for your English majors or Latin majors to bring the district forward. We can do this and we can make this work wonderfully well, and we're on our way to doing it. And it's because, and I'll tell you very honestly, the thought of this, that I mentioned it to Rebecca Smith, the thought of this whole concept started with a little conversation in her backyard this summer about coming together and helping the school district and strategically how we could move that thing forward. Started there, but it finished with board trustees, community members, students, and staff really making this possible. We are on our way, and I'll use it as a collective we, despite the fact that I'll say goodbye to the district June 30th. I'll be watching, okay? Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Olson, we have some questions already for you.
Okay.
Okay. We had some Facebook questions prior to the event. So our first one is, do you think the district relies too heavily on test scores to define success? And is there a better way of defining success?
I think there's an ebb and flow to reliance and sometimes over-reliance on test scores. I think test scores are essential, providing we create a concept called North Starring. We come to agreement, we can do this during the strategic planning process, that says these are the performance assessments that mean something to us as a community. It's not me coming to you and saying, you really ought to pay attention to this one because this is really important. It's the community coming together and saying, these are important to us because of what we want to have for our children, what we want them to know, be like, and be able to do. We've got to agree on those, and some issues at the state level. Mike has been following this very, very, very closely. The IRI, many of you know the IRI, the Idaho Reading Indicator, K through 3. is unfunded going into next year. So basically, the legislature has kind of pulled the plug on the primary assessment to identify early literature and reading skills, or literary skills and reading skills for our K through 3 kids. And the district has to come up and underpin how we're going to approach that. You've got to decide on what you're going to use to measure, again, what you want every child to be like, be able to do. And remember that it runs the span. It runs the span from very bright, from the gifted kids to the accelerated kids to the Stan Olsons. And Stan Olsons I always refer to as the LCDs, the least common denominators. Whenever I'd be in a group, if I understood it, everybody could understand it. And you gotta deal with that particular group because they're all works in progress. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Second question, also submitted on our Facebook page. After a year of being in Coeur d'Alene, where do you think the community has rallied around the district, and in what areas could the greater community be more involved?
I think the community is profoundly supportive here. I'm blown away by the unending attention and unending support that this community gives to the school district. As I said, we live pretty close to the margin, and we have the partnership, we have the XL Foundation bringing literally hundreds of thousands of dollars into the district, support, assistance, material and human resources into the district time and time and time again. I'm hoping that a couple of things happen, and this is not an easy thing to say here, but I think many of you recognize this, that this is a community that has basically two communities. It has this enriched resource rich body of people, and then it has a lot of have-nots, with 40% of our children, close to 40% of our children being eligible for free and reduced lunch. I call it socioeconomic hemisphericity. And I want to emphasize something here, folks. It's almost geographic. If we take a look at North and South Coeur d'Alene School District, you can kind of see differences. I would attest to you that many people in this room, and particularly folks with some gray hair on their heads, is that yours? Yep. Okay, right here and here and here, we all grew up in households that may very well have been free and reduced in the time. My dad was a factory worker, and my mother was a cafeteria worker. I remember seeing my mother's pay rate at 45 cents an hour in 1965, and my dad's, both worked hard, but sometimes my dad would get laid off for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and things would dry up, and pretty soon it's my mom supporting the home. We were very fortunate to have gone through the process. The common denominator for success for me was the American public school. Not only my parents who loved and helped us along the way, but it was the American public school that said, we value you, you're one of ours, and we got you moving along the way. We need to take a look at that in this community. People, again, have been very kind and very good, but the recognition of growing poverty in this community and growing need is very mixed. And we need to take a look at how we reestablish portions of this community and how we help elevate the greater good, again, for all students, with emphasis of those or on those with the most need. Be aware of that, folks, because I'll just say it real quickly. There's a group of us every year that do the Chicago Marathon. I've done it for 30 consecutive years, and to do that, this fat, slow guy has to find pathways through communities to get a lot of miles in. So I've walked through this community in very wonderful, beautiful, opulent settings, and I've walked through areas that shocked me, that surprised me. I walked past cars that people are living in because I could see their clothes, I could see their bedding. I walked past tiny houses, and these are not the fashionable tiny houses, but tiny houses that are off alleyways along the way. They're here, and they're part of our community, and that's wonderful. It's a positive thing that we have a mixture, a very, very diverse setting in this particular town, but we cannot let one side slip away while the other side progresses.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. We will now move on to our next presentation for the evening. Dr. Olson will begin with a discussion regarding current planning and progress on district growth. You get to stay on the stage.
Okay.
Building
Give me
renovations.
my clicker back here. Yeah.
And land acquisition. Following that, Dr. Mike Nelson will showcase career cruising, which is a tool currently used in our grades 7 through 12 for four-year planning, high school selection, high school course selection, and career and college exploration. There are some exciting additions to this tool which will strengthen connections between our students and our local businesses. Once again, we encourage you to write your questions on your card and raise your hand for a CEP member to collect them. Dr. Olson, we welcome your comments in regards to growth and development in the district.
Okay, many of you are very aware of this. I would attest to probably the fact that about 99% of you in this room were responsible for the passage of a $35 million bond issue to address critical needs, critical building needs, both retrofit, additions, and new in this particular community to address the needs of the school system and all of its students in all of its locations. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to go through this. You're aware of this. We're moving the process forward. It's getting interesting now as the whole region comes out of what was a recession that began 08, 09, when contractors and people involved with the construction field were falling all over each other to come and take on your project, okay? Great bids, great deals, great opportunities, great timelines, and so on and so forth. Well, the party's over. The construction trades are loaded with projects and opportunities, certainly not only in North Idaho, but as substantially down the road in that, I can't remember that other state, Washington, yeah, that particular area. Lots of building, lots of construction, lots of activity. So far, so good, but what we're finding is that the bids that we have let basically are coming in quite a bit over than what we wanted them to be. And it's indicative of a market that is becoming much, much, much less competitive, at least on behalf of school districts. It's a lot more positive for those people who are in the construction trades. And some would say, well, they suffered long enough. It's time for them to get their day. So I won't take argument with that. But you know about the high schools. You know about the Dalton work and the Fernand work and the Lakes Middle School work. The other one that's interesting and controversial in this particular community is where we're going to place a new elementary school. And at this particular stage, we've had deep discussions, and our board has acted on the placement of a new elementary school in Hayden on the site of the Hayden Lakes Elementary School. Some of you are familiar with the Nexa Academy that is there right now in that housing. The concept here is to share a land site with the city of Hayden to do two things. Number one, address parking issues that exist on that side of town. And number two, see where it says possible community space? We were told by Hayden City Council members that they've been looking for 10 years for the prospect of building a community center, focused possibly on senior citizens, but a community center. So the suggestion was, let's take a look at the prospect of combining resources, combining efforts, and moving forward on this program. Is it the perfect solution? Nope. It is one solution among a couple. One of the things we've learned, and we as a board and staff and community, my newest best friend, Steve Casey, and I have talked ad nauseum about the fact that it shoulda, coulda, woulda. Would have been nice to have this land before, would have been nice to have a land bank, and so on and so forth. We didn't. For whatever reason, I'm sure there were lots of great reasons. But in any event, we're looking at the prospect of making this thing happen in Hayden. We're also looking at more property acquisition in a number of different ways. One is pure purchase, and we're taking a look at land to put in a land bank. Why? because they're coming, folks. We have had a chance, and Lisa May did some exceptional work with long-range planning, bringing a colleague to us who is an economist and a demographer that just reinforced our knowledge about developments, children, housing, and so on and so forth. And by the way, child-producing housing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, you know what I mean. Okay. That is happening very, very, very quickly along the way in our community. So the idea, and again, I credit our board for embracing the responsibility to never get caught short again without having some land in the bank, without having some land available to situate schools. Sometimes that's done through working with developers who will say, boy, if you think about building a school in my subdivision, I'll give you 5 acres and you buy 3. That's done all over the place. I did it many, many times as superintendent in other places, and it's certainly possible. And by the way, it's happened here many times before in the earlier days of construction, school construction in this community. Other ways of doing that, again, are earmarking properties in the future that you're wanting to take a look at. We're looking at an interesting discussion right here to do 2 things. Number 1, settle some annexation issues that we've had in the district, and also possibly open up some new land for possible acquisition by the district. Let me tell you what's going on. The Post Falls School District and the Coeur d'Alene School District this past fall had a state annexation hearing. And what that is people, at least these folks, basically thought they were buying a home in the Coeur d'Alene School District when they discovered, after they moved into their house, that they were in the Post Falls School District. Now, Post Falls School District is a solid organization, very talented people, very capable district. But that's not the district in which these folks wanted to have their children attend. So we had an annexation hearing, and they go through a series of processes, and then eventually the state gets into it, and so on and so forth. Well, at the hearing, I had a chance to talk with Jerry Kane, who's the very talented, long-serving superintendent in Post Falls, Becky Meyer, who's the superintendent in Lakeland, and talented and solid as the day is long, and said, you know, folks, we can do better than this. We've got to stop pitting people against each other and districts, creating situations where districts are at odds. So we said to the hearing officer, our real solution to this is working together as surrounding school districts and redefining the boundaries. Why? Well, that red line, the current boundary, was probably let 1930, 1940, okay? When, as they say back home, there weren't no people out there, okay? No roads, no people, no housing. And they slapped down a boundary, and that was it. Well, again, times have changed, the situation has changed, and what makes sense, obviously, is perhaps using a defined observable boundary, AKA Hutter Road, to basically divide the Post Falls School District and the Coeur d'Alene School District, and then solve another problem as we come down to the river. One of the issues, if we stayed on a straight line with Hutter, would go right through another neighborhood and create another problem, and that is somebody's bedroom would be in Post Falls and the rest of the house would be in Coeur d'Alene. So what we have talked about is reestablishing the boundary using that particular concept. Interestingly, and again, I'll credit Casey Morrisroe, who knows this community very well and has led diligently in this discussion. We invited Jerry and his board chair for several conversations, have moved the process forward to the degree that a week from tonight, and you're saying to yourself, I don't have anything to do a week from tonight. At 6 o'clock at Midtown, we're going to have a joint board meeting with Post Falls. And we've invited the people in the impact area, in other words, those folks that would be impacted or affected by a boundary change, and have them come in and hear a short presentation on the boundaries, and then get about the business of talking about whether this is a smart thing to do. The process has 2 legal standards. One is a direct pathway to the State Board of Education if there's agreement between the communities. And as I've said before, it's like if Stan and Jerry are holding hands when they go before the state board and say, we love this idea, and so do our people, there's a real prospect that the state board will say, that's a great idea, approved. There's a second process that has 82 moves and 94 subsections that we have to go through, and that would take probably another year and a half. So our hope is to take this next step, come to agreement on this, and move forward. Do two things. Number one, give clarity in affected neighborhoods as to what school districts, and by the way, all of the children will be grandpersoned. So if they want to stay in the district in which they are currently attending, they can do that until they graduate. Or they can go to the other district. And then secondly, we have some opportunity to take a look at some additional land space for acquisitions for the district, which could set us up for the foreseeable 10 to 15 years. So that's part of it. That's the invitation letter, and we're not going to use that one. Okay? You want me to do questions?
Thank you. We're going to welcome Dr. Nelson,
Okay.
and then we'll ask questions of both of you. So, switching gears a bit, Dr. Nelson, we welcome you to present career cruising, but we'll stay in the present at the moment.
We have to stay in the present?
To stay in the present.
Kinda
No
tough,
past,
isn't
no
it?
future.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike. I want to apologize to you. We are all indoors on the warmest day since October 12th. But we made it. Loading. Loading. Wasn't like this earlier today. You know, one of the challenges that I have in curriculum and assessment, and luckily I don't get a whole lot of mail like he does, but when I do talk with folks, one of the most important things that people reinforce with me is that whatever we do with kids, it has to be relevant. So the question I'm going to ask to you today is pretty simple. I'm going to look at you in the eyes. How did you know what you wanted to do with your career? What sparked you? Was it a person? Was it a lesson? In Coeur d'Alene Public Schools, we have to focus on relevance. It's not just graduating kids, it's graduating kids that know what they're going to do after they graduate. So several years ago, we moved forward with a program called Career Cruising. It's a third-party software, and it answers that question. What do you want to do? Throughout the course of 5 years, students go through a series of activities that ask them to, first of all, learn. What do colleges look like? What programs do they offer? What does our community need? When they know that information, then they can do some planning. And they can figure out at that point, well, how much am I going to have to spend to be able to go to this college? What kind of goals do I have? What are my long-term and short-term dreams? And then at that point, we want them to go. We want them to go into the workforce. We want them to go into a great apprenticeship or an internship, or we want them to go to that college or university that they need to. So in this program as well, they're filling out the common application that's used by over 60% of universities today. One application, I would have loved that when I graduated. They're filling out their federal financial aid forms. About 50% of all of our seniors this year filled out a federal financial aid form. That's a huge opportunity for people. Whether they choose to use it or not, it's there. When we do all of that, then it kind of goes into this big portfolio where over 5 years, students are adding pieces to this puzzle. And by the end of that 5 years, we hope that they certainly have an answer to the question that I asked you. What kind of things do they do? Well, I'm going to show you some real-world information from one of our students. Name, of course, protected. The whole goal is to get our kids college and career ready. And I will tell you that that means something different in my household than it may be in another person's household. College and career ready depends on the skills, the mindsets, and the capabilities of our kids. Not everybody has the same. So we do our heckest to try to get the academic attributes ready to go. We're really focusing a lot on rigor in our classes. Superintendent Olson talked about math. We're trying to make some changes there. We're trying to focus on what we need to do so that the kids can take the blue path. But there's that other side over there, those soft skills. How do you teach those? How do you test those? How can you test somebody's will? Those are the types of activities that this will help us get to. When a student gets to be an 8th grader at one of our traditional middle schools, they start this process. And in there, they take a course called Design Tech, or Design Technology. It was designed the same year that we opened up K-Tech to give kids exploration, to show them the cool things that they can do with their hands and their minds and the tools that we have available for them. So you can see some of those things. Yes, we teach technical skills. Yes, we teach keyboarding skills. And we do our best to teach those soft skills down at the bottom. They're learning about financial literacy. They're learning about graphic design. And they're learning about trades. But then they start getting into this tool, into career cruising. By the way, moms, dads of kids in our district, you can log on to our district website. It's single sign-on. They can use any device. And again, they're asked a series of questions about what they want to do. And that builds with their academic history and their goals and wishes to be able to give them a pathway ahead. Starting in that 8th grade year or two, students are filling out their 4-year plan. Of course, this is adjusted every single year. They go through and they say, okay, if I have a path, what would it be? And what types of courses would I need to take to be able to get there? At that point, we have a series of activities for them. Here's what it looks like. So you can see there in the 8th grade column, the first one over, if it has a check, that's the first time they're getting it. They're starting that 4-year plan, and they're doing a career matchmaker at that point. It's going to ask them anywhere up to 20 questions. Do you like to work outside? Do you like to work with your hands? Do you like children? And it's going to, at that point, give some suggestions. They're just suggestions. They may be something that a kid would look at and say, carpenter. Okay, yeah. Then at that point, they get to take a look at it a little bit further. They get to look at the working conditions. Okay, is this what a carpenter would do? Well, okay, I might like that a little bit more. Okay, let's see, here's some of the other options. Civil engineer, construction manager, construction trades, drywaller, all of these things that our community needs. Okay. Then he gets into it a little bit further and sees, well, a carpenter could be making $12 to $35 an hour, typically would go to a 2-year college, and is this suitable for you? Well, it has a little bit of background to say, yeah. Only when that student looks in and watches the videos and takes a look at all of these other things available to them, do they click that button up there which says, Save to my plan. Then at that point, if it's saved to the plan, the student now is given a 4-year plan that they can match their 4-year plan with this 4-year plan. Again, we're trying to get them to be ready right after high school graduation to be able to get into this trade. At that point, then they get to look at education. This is a real student that we have who's currently interested in 2 schools, wants to go to either Duke or Eastern Oregon. Hey, he's keeping his options open. At that point, he can go through, click the links, find out more about how much he would pay per year to go to Duke versus how much he would pay to go to Eastern Oregon. I think, for the most part, he might be able to find a good answer. At that point, he gets to take a look at the majors that those universities offer. And then he gets to, again, save those to the schools. Again, all of this is coming together into one portfolio. By the time the student graduates, he's also putting in all of his extracurricular activities, hobbies, interests, skills, work experience, volunteer experience. By the way, it even spits out a resume when the whole thing's all done. All in one nice little package. Done every semester from every year from grade 8 in through grade 12. Again, there's some of the short and long-term goals. It's pretty dang cool. This is the first full year that we've put it into place, but at the same time, we also have big plans. And tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce you our new vision for this. Coeur d'Alene Connects is the new opportunity that we have with career cruising. Taking those saved career plans, saving those universities, and actually connecting them with people in our community. If somebody identifies themselves as having an interest in journalism, we want to connect them with NILS. Hopefully NILS will accept our expectation. Doesn't matter. Do you still check your email? Well, good. Where this gives us an opportunity to now connect our students, the volunteers and the mentors in our community. Uh-oh, it's going crazy. And now have some good conversation. Our community also has the opportunity to be able to establish some views of their own. If NILS is going to be a mentor for one of our students, they can have a moderated, controlled discussion about what life is like as a journalist in Coeur d'Alene. NILS may never actually meet the student, but it's easy for them to be able to log on and talk to each other to make sure that this is the right idea. We can also post all of the internships, apprenticeships, and job opportunities available to different students in this community. So again, we're guiding that conversation throughout. We've got a lot of people working on this thing. Our parents will have the opportunity to go in and take a look at all of this coming up in the next couple of weeks. Myself, I'm working with Dr. Trina Cottle, who's our Director of Secondary Education, as well as Mr. Mabin, who's right over there, our Director of Community Relations and Communications, and the amazing Victoria Michael, who handles a lot of our social media presence. And we're putting together all of these things. But to be able to do this effectively, we are now reaching out to you. We need to have dedicated volunteers who are going to help our students out. We need to have our experienced mentors, people like you. We need to be able to partner with our industry. Look at this incubator. This amazing facility is the dream of a local person, and they are dreaming our next dreams. We need to partner with them as well. And we need to bring all of our users together so that our workforce ultimately has the pipeline of people that are needed. We've also started reaching out to some of our existing community partners, because what we don't want to do is overreach or overwork and do other work that other people have already done. We have students who have great ideas and great knowledge. They have the desire as well. So we're starting to partner with these local organizations as well to find out how we can all work together. Ultimately, we'd love to have you be a part. On your chairs, you have our first ever publication for Coeur d'Alene Connects. If you are interested in being a part of this conversation, we'd love to have some information from you. And all it would take from you this evening is simply a message. Go ahead and visit cdaconnects.org or send your email to info@cdaschools.org, and we'll get you on the first set of lists so that we can fully launch this for the coming school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. We have some questions from the audience. The first one is actually from Facebook. And we want to know, do you feel the district is balanced in their efforts towards supporting career and technical education and traditional college paths?
What an amazing thing that we have in this community to have well-versed options at every level. Not only are we lucky that we have a great partnership with North Idaho College, we are also lucky to be able to have an amazing facility on the Rathdrum Prairie called K-Tech. And if you have not been out there, that is an extension of the programs that we currently offer at Venture, Coeur d'Alene, and Lake City High Schools. I do think that our community is well poised, and I think that we embrace career technical education more and more. And K-Tech added a brand new program area this year. They're looking to add another program area next year, and I see that expansion will continue over the next several years as well.
Thank you. Dr. Nelson, another follow-up question to that. We have been hearing and experiencing a shortage of trade workers, skilled labor in a number of different fields in our area, construction, electricians, plumbers, framers. Is there a plan to offer classes that would train our high school students in these fields aside from what's happening at K-Tech?
You know, it's interesting. We actually follow our students after graduation up until about 4 years post-graduation. We go to their colleges and universities and we find out what they're studying, how long they're taking to get a degree, and what the degree areas are. We actually share that a lot with our high school principals to make sure that the courses that we're offering actually match those needs. We have to also respond to what Dr. Olson was saying, is that everybody who's moving into this community is bringing in trades, but they're not always the trades that we need. We need to have skilled labor in this community because of how fast we're growing. Yes, we are retooling and looking at our high schools to make sure that the right programs are available in the right areas, or that we have dual credit options whereby a student can take part of their day at Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, or Ventura High School and dual enroll at North Idaho College in their workforce training center.
Thank you. Dr. Nelson, we're shifting gears back. I'm sorry, Dr. Olson, your names are too similar. Following back up again on district growth and expansion, we're curious to know if the next Hayden site is the chosen site for our new elementary school. How many years out do you project that we would realistically have a new school in the northwest sector of the district as promised to our voters in the bond?
That's an excellent question. Actually, last week we got some very good news. The board took action a little while ago this month on a concept called bond defeasance, which, in long story short, is basically paying your mortgage off early, okay, in the bond process. And what it allows is that we pay down the interest on the bonds that we have let, whether it's in the region or across the country or whatever else along the way, which allows basically the district to incur benefit to say, we could conceivably ask our taxpayers to approve $30, $40, $50 million in new bonds without changing the tax rate because of the early payoff of the interest. So it creates an opportunity, and it kind of also creates a responsibility for us to get on the horse and take a look at a number of things. Deeper dive in demographics, changes in the community, developments. Many of you know Jen Decker, and a little while ago we were at long-range planning, and she said, "Stan, what do you make of our planning department of the district?" And I said, "Well, I make of it that it doesn't exist." We have, like most school districts around the state and the country, we have a patchwork quilt. We have a couple of offices doing a little this and a couple of offices doing a little this. And come time to plan a bond, they all kind of meld together, create this dossier of information. We get it out there. The bond program is over. Everybody goes back to their normal work, whatever that is. Can't do that anymore. We've got to stay on top of all of the changes that are taking place in the community, all of the plans that are coming forward, all of the approvals that are going through our three district cities, and plan. We've just received somewhat of an ace in a hole, if you will, on this defeasance situation. I'm trying to remember, Lisa, 2 years we could conceivably go for bond? What was that? Yeah, 2 years and somewhere between $35 and $50 million to be able. Will we need a school along that way? We may very well. We may very well. The trajectory that we're seeing in cohort survival, in other words, how many kids that we get into the district, how many kids stay in the district and move through the grades and sustain, is quite substantial. And it basically means they're not only growing, but there are more coming. So 2 steps though: do the planning, do the work, do the projecting, and then come to consensus on what the needs are, and then move forward on the needs. This is, again, a community that embraces quality data. embraces logic, embraces the need to serve our children and our developing populations. So if it's done right, if it's done well, it's a win.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will now move on to our final presentation for the evening. Dr. Olson has provided the district with remarkable leadership over this past year to pave the way for incoming superintendent, Dr. Cook. Dr. Olson, will you please speak a little more at length as you introduce our incoming superintendent, Dr. Cook?
Okay, remember, Steve, I'm your agent and I get 20% here. Ladies and gentlemen, we went through a rather substantial process in the superintendent search, the community reviews, sessions, discussions, and so on and so forth, and it netted us a quality candidate coming from the Douglas County School District in the Front Range of Colorado. Douglas County, if my memory serves me well, is an 80,000 student school district. Very big, very substantial, multifaceted, deep, rich programs across the board. Steve has served in that particular community, if I remember correctly, 4 to 5 years, but his service in Douglas County was preceded with about 25 years of service in the state of Kansas. And what's wonderful about his service in Kansas is that he started in a small population school district as a teacher and ultimately an administrator. One of his specialties was turning around low-performing schools as a teacher, as an administrator, and ultimately as a district leader. And that's why he was so attractive to Douglas County. Well, when he had the opportunity to come and look at Coeur d'Alene, many of you, I remember Bill and Amy running one session where the first thing he said, and he says, "Hey, I didn't even know you had a lake." He's very much excited about coming here. He is an academician. He's a person who has deep connection with the communities he serves and a love for children, a love for the development of children. So I get 20% here, buddy. That's not him.
Hello. Hey.
Dr. Cook, this is Amy Voller, President of Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership. Good evening.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Boy, this is so weird. I'm just staring at people staring.
We would love to have you talk a little bit about your vision for where you'd like to go from here as you step into the new superintendent position here in Coeur d'Alene School District.
Sure, I'd be glad to. First of all, let me start by thanking everybody for accommodating me on this. This was kind of a change of plans, and I'm just very grateful. My needs were to stay here and help my wife recover, and so I'm just thankful. I'm disappointed that I can't be here, but I needed to make that priority first. So thanks to everyone for indulging me for that. So I'd like to talk about 3 things tonight, if I might, and they're things that I wouldn't be so brave as to talk about what the vision or the future is for Coeur d'Alene School District, but maybe just talk about what I believe in. To be honest, I don't know what I don't know yet about Coeur d'Alene School District, and I'm not going to know that until I have some time to get there and talk with people and learn. And I intend to learn a lot as soon as I possibly can. So the 3 things I'd like to talk about are, first of all, kind of how I qualify what it means to define a 21st century learning experience. And the first one is setting high standards, holding them high expectations for kids. What does that look like? That is creating a culture and an environment that supports a high learning expectation for students. We talk about 3 different things when we talk about that. What is it that we want kids to know? What skills do we want them to have, and who do we want them to be? I will talk about that a lot. Those are three completely different things, and we talk about those specifically. Oftentimes, what we want them to know is the content. Skills are verbs that we value, the things that we want kids to be able to do, whether that's, something as simple as keyboarding or something more complex like collaborating or communicating in a 21st century environment. And the last one is, who do we want them to be? What are the dispositions that we value? What are the traits that we want our kids to have and model? And the way we can figure out those things is just by focusing on what's the end user experience and asking kids too, what's it like to learn? What's it like to go to school in our district? The second one I think is equally as important is I treat all teachers as professionals. That means I'd kind of default to this idea of everybody's treated as a 5-star. And I give you the opportunity to show me any different, that there's a reason to treat you differently. I lead with positive presupposition, just simply making sure that I establish trust and relationships. So treating teachers as professionals means that I have to set an expectation for excellence, and then go out and look for it and talk about it. And if it's not there, then we provide opportunities to train for it. And effective training starts with finding out what teachers need and then giving them those opportunities to work together, and then in time to implement whatever that training might be in an appropriate fashion. It is a passion for me is to make sure that people, that adults, are getting what they need to be able to deliver support to kids. And whether that's working on pedagogy, whether that's working on psychological kinds of things, back to that point of understanding who we want our kids to be, or something that's just simply about student behavior and cognition. All of the training we're going to provide, we want to make sure is of value to teachers. And I live by a mantra that is, make it as simple as possible, but no simpler. It's really, really difficult to teach, because not everything works every time. And so as you spend time in the classroom, some things are going to fail and some things are going to go fantastically. You cannot be afraid of, as a teacher, you cannot be afraid of failing in the classroom. That means we have to have a culture of risk-taking and being tolerant to taking chances in a class, not being afraid to try to move fast and try new ideas, and when it doesn't work, go back and adjust. It also means that I have a large tolerance for what I like to call bottom-up innovation. Excellence in a classroom doesn't start with something I say. Excellence starts with what teachers do in a classroom. So I like to call that this kind of philosophy of scaling up excellence in a school district is more of a ground war than it is an air war. And platitudes from the superintendent don't make that difference, but empowering teachers to make fantastic decisions on behalf of kids is where that happens. There's no greater influence on student learning than a quality teacher in the classroom. And so it's my job to ensure that we're providing that as best we can. And the third thing that I'd like to kind of emphasize tonight is the importance of quality leadership in schools. The number one factor in student learning is an excellent teacher. The number two factor in student learning is great leadership in the school to protect the teacher doing fantastic work in schools. So as far as how do I promote that, I think it's important to nurture a community of what I like to call our warm demanders, which means, goes back to that combination of expectations, creating an environment that puts high expectations on everybody. The warm part of that comment, warm demanders, means coming from a place of relationships, so that when a principal who values their teachers says, hey, we can do better, teachers tend to believe in that based upon the relationship they have with the principal, not because of any other reasons. I see that statement live in a very common platitude that is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And because learning environments are so dynamic all the time, I think that's a good default place to start. The second part of leadership is I want us to always seek to understand and develop a kind of a common empathetic approach with one another. Back to that 5-star approach, we always default to positive presupposition, come from a point of trust until we have reason to believe otherwise. And in that regard, I like to honor people taking chances and being vulnerable. It's a demonstration of courage when people are willing to be vulnerable. And I think lastly, with leadership, I think it's really important to celebrate everything we do, whether it's student success, whether it's adult success, but to make sure that people feel valued for the things that they're choosing to do on behalf of kids, and establish that kind of a culture in the community that there are lots of things to be excited about and in our school district, and how we honor that and how we reward that, if you will, is going to make people more likely to take chances in the future on behalf of kids. I think it's really important to create a culture of feedback. I'm really good at feedback. It doesn't feel like I'm giving feedback. I ask a lot of questions, and I do it in a very graceful but disruptive way. And my questions are meant to create just an opportunity for thinking and conversation, and it's really kind of a dialogue. And then lastly, just as what's the role of the superintendent? What do I see the role of the superintendent being? I've never been a superintendent before, but I do believe it's the superintendent's job to go back to what's the end user experience, and whether that end user is a parent, whether it's a kid, whether it's a teacher who's overwhelmed or doing the best they can, or it's a building administrator. Everybody has a perspective, and that is making sure that I understand what that end user's position is and honor that. We may not agree, we may not always agree, but it's a lot easier for me to come from a point of understanding if I'm at least walking in those shoes. And I think it's important for us to build a culture and a community around the schools where we're all contributing together. I don't mind saying this. This is going off script just a little bit. We're building a house in Coeur d'Alene. It's already breaking ground. So if this doesn't go well for me, I'm in a mess, because I was really hoping on staying for a while. I am very excited about what I found when I investigated Coeur d'Alene, and I could not be happier to be coming and just getting a chance to be embedded into the community. I can talk vision and strategy and all those kinds of things all night long. Like I said at the beginning, I know just enough to be dangerous. And if somebody asks me what's my vision for the next steps, if I start talking about vision now, you're going to get some kind of nonsense. Because I don't know all that I don't know. I'm excited for the opportunity to get in, embed myself in the community, and start getting all that done. I can tell you all kinds of stuff we need to do here in Douglas County, but it's time for me to close that chapter and start the next chapter, which is there in Coeur d'Alene, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. This is Tracy Hanks. I'm actually behind you. You can't see me. But we do have a question from Facebook, which is preliminarily, what is one of your top priorities for change within the district, and how do you plan to do that? Which maybe you just said you can't quite answer, but we would like to know a little bit.
Sure. So I would say go back to the statement on what do we want kids collectively? What do we want kids to know? What skills do we want them to have? And who do we want them to be? My focus will be digging under each one of those rocks deeply. When I say the words know, do, and be, you'll hear me say those a lot. It is a very overt questioning to set the expectation for we've got to have a reason for what we're choosing. And as I taught for 13 years, and I was a physics teacher, and I used to go round and round with a math teacher in my school district, because physics, by its own nature, talks about how math is applied. And the math teacher would talk just about the math. And there's lots and lots of skills in both. But if we can't, and the argument he and I would have was if kids cannot define why they're doing something, then their likelihood of retaining that knowledge is gone. And so one of the things that I'm going to push is that not only do we need to know what we're teaching kids, but kids need to know what we're teaching them and why. And if it's not applicable, then we've got to question that. So the very first thing I think I would ask for with regards to changing is getting my arms wrapped around what are those values. The values of the curriculum, the values of skills that we believe that we need to teach to our kids, and the values of what do we want our kids to be. This is always a tough spot. Do we teach things like civility? Do we teach things like character education? Is it the school's responsibility? Do we have an obligation to talk about a global learning environment? That question alone will scare some people. That's the kind of stuff that I'm going to want to dig into very, very deeply and find out what our value statements are and why we feel like those are important to us.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. This is Amy again. We have a question that was submitted by a member of the audience. You may or may not be aware of a movement within Idaho, but it is more of a national trend to promote school vouchers, the opportunity to utilize funding for private schools. I'd like to know your perspective on that, how you see that would affect our public schools as a whole and special education in particular.
Sure. So that's, I don't know if the audience member who submitted that question knows, but I'm currently the deputy superintendent for Douglas County School District in Colorado, which is where two Supreme Court cases were just on their path to the U.S. Supreme Court. The first one was called the Andrew F. case, which was the de minimis case about what is considered FAPE anymore for special ed students. And it used to be that enough, that the kid making minimum progress was acceptable. And now that case has been sent back from the U.S. Supreme Court back to the state court, which is we've got to determine now that de minimis is not enough. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that is not enough, and now we've got to determine what is enough. And that's what we're defining nationally. The second part of that is the voucher case is determine whether or not public education funds should be going to other private schools. When I get to Idaho, it will be my 30th year in education. I've been a public school educator for all 30 years of my career. And I can tell you this, monies leaving school districts are always a challenge for those that are still in the school districts. That being said, we also have people that will say parents' choice for what is best for their kids are always the most important variables. Those two things will conflict every time they run into each other because special needs parents may not, and not even just special needs parents may not be feeling like they're getting what they need from their school district. And when those cases arrive, that's why you have lawsuits, and that's why each one is a case-by-case decision. I will always advocate as a public school educator, as I've done for 30 years, that the most important thing is to maximize the amount of resources we've got in the school district to provide for all of our kids. And I will stand by those words.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. This concludes our evening's program. Would you please join me in thanking Dr. Cook for being willing to be flexible with us? Thank you also, Dr. Olson, for your leadership this past year. Thank you, Dr. Nelson, for your ongoing leadership, and we look forward to your incoming leadership, Dr. Cook. We'd also like to thank our audience.
Everybody.
We'd also like to thank our audience for engaging with Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership to support excellence in education. One last reminder, please take a moment to complete the form on the back of your agenda, Ways to Get Involved, for entry into our raffle for a pair of Disco Dance Explosion tickets. Also, please take a moment to visit the librarian's table at the back of the room to see how our community's generous donations towards CEP's annual Disco Dance Explosion have helped our school librarians expand and enrich their collections. We invite you to enjoy some refreshments and visit with CEP board members and district representatives. Thank you, and again, good night.